Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed the underlying tensions before anyone spoke a word, or witnessed something so glaringly obvious that it escaped everyone else's notice entirely? This phenomenon represents one of humanity's most dangerous gifts: the ability to perceive patterns, connections, and truths that remain invisible to the majority. History reveals that those who see beyond the conventional boundaries of perception often pay a steep price for their clarity of vision, becoming outcasts in the very societies they attempt to enlighten. In 1846, a young Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis was working at Vienna General Hospital when he noticed something that would cost him his career and ultimately his life. The first obstetrical clinic, staffed by doctors and medical students, had a mortality rate of 18% from childbed fever, while the adjacent clinic, run by midwives, had deaths in only 2% of cases. Semmelweis observed that physicians frequently moved directly from conducting autopsies in the morgue to delivering babies without washing their hands, carrying what he called cadaverous particles from corpses to living mothers. When he implemented mandatory hand washing with chlorinated lime solutions, the death rate plummeted to less than 2%, essentially eliminating the deadly infection. Rather than celebrating this miraculous discovery that saved countless lives, the medical establishment turned against Semmelweis with unprecedented fury. Senior physicians were offended by the implication that their hands could be instruments of death, mocking him for suggesting they were responsible for killing their patients. The established medical doctrine of the time attributed disease to miasmas, mysterious airborne substances, making Semmelweis's germ theory seem absurd to his contemporaries. Despite overwhelming statistical evidence, the medical community abandoned his protocols after he lost his position, and mortality rates soared once again. Semmelweis grew increasingly desperate and vocal in his attempts to convince his colleagues, writing letters to prominent European physicians that were described as angry and accusatory. His mental state deteriorated as he watched women continue to die from a completely preventable cause, while the medical establishment remained willfully blind to the evidence. In 1865, at the age of 47, his colleagues had him committed to a mental asylum where he was beaten by guards and died 14 days later from sepsis, the same type of infection he had spent his life fighting. His vindication came only decades later, when Louis Pasteur's germ theory provided the scientific framework that explained his observations. But by then it was far too late for the man who could have revolutionized medicine decades earlier. This tragic story illustrates a fundamental truth about human perception and social dynamics. Those who see what others cannot often become threats to the established order, regardless of how beneficial their insights might be. The phenomenon extends far beyond medicine, into every realm of human endeavor, where paradigm shifters consistently face rejection, ridicule, and persecution. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato captured this dynamic in his famous allegory of the cave, where prisoners, chained in darkness, mistake shadows on the wall for reality itself. And when one escapes to see the true world illuminated by sunlight, the others refuse to believe his account and may even kill him for challenging their comfortable illusions. Modern neuroscience has revealed that human perception is not a passive recording of external reality, but an active construction process where the brain filters, interprets, and organizes sensory information according to existing mental frameworks. The human mind processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second, but can only consciously handle about 40 bits, meaning that 99.996% of available information is filtered out below the threshold of awareness. This massive filtering operation relies heavily on pattern recognition, expectations, and social conditioning to determine what deserves conscious attention and what can be safely ignored. Most people develop remarkably similar filtering systems based on cultural programming, educational conditioning, and social reinforcement. creating shared blind spots that entire societies can maintain for generations. These collective blind spots serve important social functions by enabling smooth cooperation and reducing cognitive overload. But they also create vulnerabilities where important information can be systematically overlooked or dismissed. Individuals who develop different filtering patterns, whether through genetic variation, unusual experiences, or conscious training, may perceive aspects of reality that remain hidden from the majority. The selectivity of human attention creates what psychologists call the invisible gorilla effect, demonstrated in a famous experiment where participants watching a video of people passing basketballs completely failed to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. This selective blindness operates not only in laboratory settings, but in every aspect of daily life, where people routinely miss obvious patterns, connections, and anomalies because their attention is focused elsewhere. Those who notice the gorilla in the room often find themselves isolated and disbelieved, even when the evidence is overwhelming. Research in social psychology has identified numerous mechanisms by which groups maintain collective illusions and resist disconfirming information. Groupthink occurs when the desire for harmony within a group overrides realistic evaluation of alternatives, leading to irrational and dysfunctional decision-making. Members self-censor doubts, pressure dissenters to conform, maintain illusions of unanimity, and stereotype outsiders who challenge the group consensus. These dynamics create echo chambers where false beliefs can persist indefinitely, immune to correction from external reality. Cognitive dissonance theory explains why people often respond to contradictory evidence by attacking the messenger rather than examining the message. When new information conflicts with existing beliefs, the psychological discomfort motivates people to reduce the tension by discrediting the source, reinterpreting the evidence, or simply ignoring it entirely. This natural tendency to preserve existing worldviews makes it extremely difficult for revolutionary insights to gain acceptance, even when they are demonstrably correct and beneficial. The history of scientific progress is littered with examples of revolutionary thinkers whose ideas were initially rejected by the establishment. Nicolaus Copernicus delayed publishing his heliocentric theory for decades, knowing it would challenge religious doctrine and provoke fierce opposition. When Galileo Galilei provided telescopic evidence supporting the Copernican model, he was tried by the Inquisition and forced to recant under threat of torture. Charles Darwin waited over 20 years before publishing his theory of evolution, anticipating the religious and social upheaval it would cause. Albert Einstein's relativity theories were dismissed by many physicists as absurd mathematical speculation until experimental evidence made denial impossible. These scientific revolutionaries shared certain characteristics that enabled them to see beyond the conventional wisdom of their times. They possessed what psychologists call divergent thinking, the ability to generate multiple solutions to problems and see connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. They demonstrated high tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty, remaining comfortable with incomplete information while others demanded premature closure. They exhibited intellectual courage, willing to pursue ideas despite social pressure and professional risk. Creative individuals often display personality patterns that set them apart from the general population, combining traits that seem contradictory. They can be simultaneously playful and disciplined, imaginative and realistic, humble and proud, introverted and extroverted, depending on the situation. This psychological complexity enables them to access different modes of thinking and perception that remain unavailable to more rigid personalities. However, this same complexity can make them difficult for others to understand and categorize, leading to social rejection and marginalization. The phenomenon of high sensitivity affects approximately 20% of the population, characterized by deeper processing of sensory information, greater emotional reactivity, and increased awareness of subtleties in the environment. Highly sensitive individuals often notice details that others miss, pick up on emotional undercurrents in social situations, and become overwhelmed by stimuli that others find tolerable. While this trait can enhance creativity and empathy, it also makes these individuals vulnerable to overstimulation and social misunderstanding. Intuitive thinking represents another pathway to alternative perception, involving rapid, unconscious processing of complex patterns and relationships. Intuitive insights often arrive as sudden flashes of understanding that precede logical analysis, providing solutions and perspectives that purely rational approaches might miss. However, intuitive knowledge is difficult to explain and defend, making it vulnerable to dismissal by those who demand step-by-step logical justification for every conclusion. The Myers-Briggs personality framework identifies intuitive types as comprising approximately 25% of the population, individuals who focus on possibilities, patterns, and meanings rather than concrete facts and immediate realities. These personality types often feel alienated in societies that prioritize practical, sensory-based approaches to problem solving. Their tendency to see the big picture and anticipate future trends can make them valuable advisors and innovators, but also burdens them with knowledge that others are not yet ready to accept. Throughout history, mystics and spiritual seekers have developed practices designed to expand perception beyond ordinary consciousness, including meditation, contemplation, fasting, and various forms of sensory alteration. These practices can produce profound shifts in awareness, revealing dimensions of reality that remain hidden during normal waking consciousness. However, attempts to communicate these experiences to others often result in misunderstanding, ridicule, or accusations of mental illness, as the insights gained through altered states cannot be easily verified through conventional means. The relationship between mental illness and alternative perception presents complex questions that psychiatry continues to grapple with. Some conditions classified as pathological, such as certain forms of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, can involve perceptual experiences that deviate dramatically from consensus reality. However, history also provides numerous examples of individuals who were labeled as mentally ill for expressing ideas that later proved correct and valuable. The Soviet Union routinely committed political dissidents to psychiatric hospitals, diagnosing opposition to the regime as evidence of mental disorder. The phenomenon of gaslighting, named after a play where a husband manipulates his wife into questioning her own perceptions, illustrates how social pressure can be used to suppress uncomfortable truths. When individuals notice patterns or problems that others prefer to ignore, they may face systematic attempts to undermine their credibility and confidence. Gaslighting techniques include denying obvious facts, minimizing legitimate concerns, questioning the person's memory or sanity, and isolating them from potential supporters. Cultural anthropology reveals that different societies develop radically different ways of organizing perception and interpreting reality. What one culture considers obvious truth, another may regard as dangerous delusion. Shamanic traditions recognize altered states of consciousness as valid sources of knowledge, while Western medicine typically pathologizes such experiences. Some cultures value intuitive and holistic thinking patterns, while others prioritize analytical and reductionist approaches. These cultural differences demonstrate that perception itself is partially learned and socially constructed. The concept of paradigm shifts, introduced by philosopher Thomas Kuhn, describes how scientific communities periodically undergo revolutionary changes in their basic assumptions about reality. Normal science operates within established paradigms, solving puzzles according to accepted rules and methods. However, anomalies eventually accumulate that cannot be explained within the existing framework, leading to crisis periods where alternative paradigms compete for acceptance. The transition to new paradigms often involves generational change, as established scientists resist abandoning the worldviews that defined their careers. Similar dynamics operate in other domains beyond science, including art, politics, philosophy, and spirituality. Revolutionary artists like Pablo Picasso and Igor Stravinsky faced initial rejection before their innovations became accepted as masterpieces. Political revolutionaries from Mahatma Gandhi to Martin Luther King Jr. challenged established power structures and faced imprisonment, violence, and assassination attempts. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard were largely ignored during their lifetimes before gaining posthumous recognition as profound thinkers. The digital age has created new opportunities for alternative perspectives to find audiences through social media, blogs, and online communities. However, it has also enabled the formation of filter bubbles and echo chambers, where people can reinforce existing beliefs while avoiding contradictory information. The same technologies that could democratize knowledge and promote intellectual diversity can also fragment society into incompatible reality tunnels where meaningful dialogue becomes impossible. Artificial intelligence and machine learning systems are increasingly being used to identify patterns in data that human observers might miss, potentially augmenting human perception in unprecedented ways. However, these systems also carry the biases and limitations of their human creators, potentially institutionalizing blind spots on a massive scale. The question of whether artificial intelligence might develop forms of perception that transcend human limitations remains open, with profound implications for the future of knowledge and understanding. The evolutionary function of alternative perception may be to provide variation and adaptability within human populations, ensuring that some individuals can recognize new challenges and opportunities before they become obvious to everyone. From this perspective, those who see differently serve as early warning systems and scouts for the species, even when their insights prove uncomfortable or inconvenient for the majority. The persecution they face may represent an unfortunate but predictable response to the disruption their vision creates. The price of seeing beyond conventional boundaries includes not only social rejection and professional sabotage, but also the burden of knowledge itself. Those who perceive deeper patterns in reality often become aware of problems, dangers, and possibilities that remain hidden from others. This awareness can create a sense of responsibility and urgency that others do not share, leading to frustration, isolation, and sometimes despair. The Greek myth of Cassandra, cursed to prophesy truthfully but never be believed, captures this tragic dimension of enhanced perception. However, the same clarity that brings suffering can also provide extraordinary freedom and fulfillment. Those who see through social illusions and cultural conditioning may experience liberation from the anxieties and conflicts that dominate ordinary consciousness. They can participate in social games while maintaining awareness of their artificial nature, neither rejecting society entirely nor becoming trapped by its limitations. This detached engagement requires considerable skill and wisdom, but can lead to a more authentic and creative way of being. The development of enhanced perception often follows predictable stages, beginning with vague dissatisfaction with conventional explanations and gradually progressing toward clearer alternative vision. This process typically involves periods of confusion, doubt, and social conflict as the individual struggles to integrate new insights with existing beliefs and relationships. Many never complete this journey, retreating to conventional perspectives when the social costs become too high. Those who persist often develop strategies for navigating the challenges of alternative perception, including finding communities of like-minded individuals, learning to communicate insights in acceptable ways, and maintaining balance between vision and practical effectiveness. The most successful visionaries often become skilled at translating their insights into forms that others can gradually accept, using stories, metaphors, and incremental approaches rather than direct confrontation. The ultimate paradox of enhanced perception is that it reveals both the illusory nature of many human concerns and the profound importance of human experience itself. When the artificial nature of social constructions becomes apparent, it might seem logical to withdraw from engagement entirely. However, the deepest wisdom often involves embracing both the relative and absolute levels of reality, participating fully in the human drama while maintaining awareness of its dreamlike quality. This integration requires what mystics have called the middle way, neither rejecting the world as meaningless illusion nor becoming trapped in identification with temporary roles and circumstances. The accomplished seer learns to dance between different levels of reality, serious when seriousness serves a purpose, but never losing sight of the cosmic joke that underlies all human striving. This balanced perspective can transform the burden of alternative perception into a gift that enriches both the individual and the community. The future evolution of human consciousness may depend partly on how successfully societies learn to integrate and utilize alternative forms of perception rather than suppressing them. As the pace of change accelerates and traditional solutions prove inadequate for emerging challenges, the insights of those who see differently may become increasingly valuable. The persecution that visionaries have historically endured may give way to recognition and support, though this transformation will likely occur gradually and unevenly across different domains and cultures. Understanding the dynamics of alternative perception can help both those who possess such abilities and those who encounter them to navigate these complex territories more skillfully. For the seers, this understanding can provide comfort in knowing that their struggles are part of a larger pattern that has played out throughout history. For others, it can cultivate appreciation for the valuable role that different perspectives play in the ongoing evolution of human knowledge and wisdom. The story of perception beyond ordinary boundaries ultimately reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness itself, suggesting that reality contains far more richness and complexity than any single perspective can encompass. Those brave enough to venture beyond the comfortable boundaries of consensus reality serve as explorers and messengers, bringing back reports from territories that the majority has yet to discover. Their journey may be perilous and lonely, but it expands the map of human possibility for all who come after.